Listeners, beware. This podcast contains themes of the macabre and does not shy away from the details. Our content is graphic and our language is colorful. We might not be your cup of tea, so listener discretion is strongly advised. You have tuned in to The Killer Tea, a podcast hosted by two best friends with a proclivity to decipher the deeply demented minds of murderers.
Welcome to episode 7 of The Killer Tea. On today's episode, we will be talking about the Beast of Chicago,
H.H. Holmes.
We are your hosts, Christina.
And Chelsea. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for coming in and stopping by in the podcast world.
Thanks for listening.
Hey, and if you want to be super helpful and hear more about serial killers from us, go and like, rate, and comment our podcast anywhere that you listen to the damn thing.
Yes, please do. Right now we only have one review on the Apple Podcasts, and it would be super awesome if we had more than one.
Yeah, and it's one of our friends.
Yeah. So
our friend came to help us.
So please go and review our podcast. Don't just give it a star. We need to talk about our fuck up from last week.
Oh, yeah, we fucked up last week, y'all.
We forgot the Dahmer scale.
The Dahmer scale for Mrs.
Nanny Doss. So, getting on that, Christina, where do you rate Nanny Doss on the Dahmer scale?
Don't get me wrong, she was horrible and fucked up, and we say this every time, there's worse out there. But I'm gonna give her like a 4.
Yeah. I'm with you.
But she was clean, and it wasn't a ton of strangers. And...
No, I mean, don't get me wrong. Killing your family is just as fucked up as killing a bunch of strangers.
And we are rating you on a spectrum of serial killers.
We really are.
So,
but I mean, in the grand scheme of things, no. I mean, and yeah, no. I'm not gonna say what I was gonna say, but yeah. Yeah, I don't think she deserves a high rating. She poisoned her loved ones and, well, not so loved ones.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, she's just not that bad of a bitch. Like, she's a terrible person, but in the grand scheme of serial killers...
But they're all, they're all terrible. We're rating how terrible they are on a scale of terrible people.
I mean, she's no Jeffrey Dahmer.
She's not a Jeffrey Dahmer, and that...
She's
that
not
matters.
an Ed Kemper.
Yeah.
She's not... a Dennis Nielsen.
Yeah, no matter what you do, like they're all, even if you're on a 1 out of 10 on the Dahmer scale, you're a fucked up individual.
I feel like the Dahmer scale is like a grossness level.
Yeah, it can definitely be a grossness level.
Yeah.
It can definitely be a grossness level.
I think that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you know, murdering your children and all that stuff is definitely gross, and we don't want to take away from that or make light of any of it. But how else are you supposed to cope with something so fucked up that your brain just... You have to be able to make some sort of humor out of it.
Or at least that's how my brain copes.
That's how my brain functions. And if your brain doesn't function that way, this isn't the podcast for you.
No. So,
Anyway, speaking of really fucked up things...
Today, we're going to talk about Christina's pick, who is H.H. Holmes. And this is a very interesting one.
A unique situation.
So I think we're going to approach this one a little bit differently than we normally do.
Yes. I, for one, would really enjoy doing this a little bit differently.
So, Christina, do you want to just set us on off then?
H.H. Holmes is a... man, myth, and legend.
Yes, I could agree with that. Very much a legend.
I was born with the devil in me. I could not help the fact that I was a murderer, no more than the poet could help the inspiration to sing. I was born with the evil one standing as my sponsor beside the bed where I was ushered into the world, and he has been with me since. Interesting. Very, very interesting.
I'm just going to keep my comments to myself for a minute.
Keep your fucking comments. I know what you're going to say. This is for the viewers, Chelsea. Not for you.
Not saying a word.
The
Carry
audio
on.
listeners. H.H. Holmes is said to have killed as many as 200 people. He would eventually confess to about 28 murders, but only 9 could ever be confirmed. He's said to have been born into an abusive household with an alcoholic father. Holmes began to torture animals and even dissect them as a small child. And speaking of small children, he was known for being particularly cruel to small children. Some accounts even indicate that he may have been responsible for the death of a very young friend at a young age. He was described by many who knew him as being shy and standoffish and never meeting anyone's eyes or looking them squarely in the face. He would eventually go on to medical school and begin his life of heinous crime. He would steal cadavers from the school for his nefarious experiments, including dissection, and he'd even remove the flesh from the bones to sell back to the community as educational skeletons for professional use in the colleges.
Sure.
Holmes was a known womanizer, and he had various affairs while still being married to his first wife, Clara, and other marriages while he was still married to his first wife. After completing his medical degree, he purchased a pharmacy where he would perform illegal medical abortions that sometimes resulted in the death of various mothers. Shortly after buying the pharmacy, Holmes actually bought the lot directly across from the pharmacy, and he started building what would come to be known as the Murder Castle. He had various contractors work on the building and would have them build various secret doors and passageways and compartments. And in order to keep the locations and the final layout of the Murder Castle a secret, he would kill off the different contractors in order to preserve his murder castle, where he would be able to get away with hiding and storing and stashing and torturing all the different various victims. I noticed that you're very quiet, Chelsea.
Yep. Sounds good. Just waiting on you to finish this bullshit up.
Oh, God. Fueled by his thirst for blood, Holmes would complete the murder castle just in time for the 1892 World's Fair in Chicago, hoping to prey on the many transient visitors that would be flocking to Chicago.
As you do. Sure.
As you do. Because he was presenting this to the public as a hotel, and he was banking on all these people coming in order to have a fresh flow of victims.
I'm so sure that's exactly what he was doing.
He built torture rooms. He had chutes where he could easily dispose of the body by sending them down the chute into the basement. Hidden doorways and different rooms to store the corpses of all the hotel occupants that he ended up killing. And it was even discovered that there was a soundproof gas chamber within the castle that he would use to put victims in and, the Nazi style death.
Wow, I really wonder how he managed to build that inside this hotel. That is absolutely fascinating. Tell me more.
I don't appreciate the fucking tone of your voice, Chelsea.
Just waiting for you to wrap this up so we can actually talk about what happened.
Holmes would go on to use the World's Fair as a way to prey on dozens and dozens of people. And it is believed that he was never actually put to death. Many people speculate that he was actually the famous British serial killer, Jack the Ripper, based upon the findings of his personal journals where he described murdering prostitutes while in London. Jeff Mudgett, a lawyer and former commander of the U.S. Naval Reserve, claims that his great-great-grandfather, H.H. Holmes, was in fact Jack the Ripper. Mudgett bases these assertions on writings in 2 diaries that he supposedly has inherited from Holmes, which goes into great detail of Holmes participating in the murder and mutilation of several prostitutes in London. So Mudgett also claims that the man who died during the public hanging of H.H. Holmes was just a man that Holmes somehow coerced into getting into the gallows.
Are you done? Is that it?
And that is the legend of H.H. Holmes, the most nefarious, prolific serial killer in America that killed over 200 people. And that is all true.
That is 99% bullshit. Can I talk about what the actual facts are?
You can. Oh, okay, hold on a second. Let me set the scene for the listeners here. That was the presented story that I have known for years at this point. This is something that, like, he was one of the most fascinating serial killers stories to me because I thought that was real. I thought that was all true.
And it's funny because when we were discussing which big serial killer we were going to do next, because that's where we are in our rotation. This is our well-known serial killer. And I honestly didn't know that much about H.H. Holmes. I'd never really heard of him. I'd heard of the Myrtle Castle.
Is it like the one in Myrtle Beach?
That one, exactly. No, I'd heard of the Murder Castle, but only in relation to American Horror Story.
Yeah,
Hotel,
which is loosely based on.
Which is very loosely based.
There was supposed to be a movie with Leonardo DiCaprio. I don't know if it's ever going to happen,
Yeah,
but
I'm not
wouldn't that
sure.
be awesome?
Now, that would be totally awesome and worth seeing. I would love to see that.
I would love to see Leo in
But
something
when
like that.
you suggested him, I had actually just finished listening to a podcast about him, and I was like, but none of it's true, because I just listened to this other podcast, and they were talking about how disappointed their fans would be. And so when I told you, you were just like,
what the fuck?
what? No.
What the fuck? And Grant, listen, I'm very happy that he didn't murder 200 people.
No.
However, I don't know. It's like a bedtime scary story that you go to bed with all the time, and you're so accustomed to that story to hear that be done different. You're like, no, that's not the circumstance at all. Where are you getting your information from? I need your sources. This is bullshit. Though I could not produce any credible sources to my story whatsoever.
No, there are literally no credible sources. Although it's really funny to read because when you Google him, all the legends come up first. It's actually really hard, and you really have to dig.
Yeah, you got to do a little bit more of a deep dive to get the good shit.
Yeah.
All right, Chelsea. So why don't you tell us the truth?
That leads us to the truth. So, H.H. Holmes was actually born Herman Webster Mudgett in Gilmantown, New Hampshire on May 16th of 1880. And he was the third born to Levi and Theodelle Mudgett, and he had two sisters and a brother. He was actually an extremely bright, ambitious, and studious child who has no factual basis of being cruel to animals or to other children. That is completely baseless. And he was so bright that he graduated high school at the age of 16 years and became a school teacher.
Yeah, I did hear all of that.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess that's fucking true. Though I did hear that he was one of 5 children.
Oh, I only had 4. But you know what? It was the 1800s.
They were popping out babies
They were popping out babies left and right. It's very possible that
Pull
he
and
did.
Pray was weak back then.
It was very possible that he did have 5, and my research just told me 4. So, yeah, he was not abusive to animals. So, I mean, yay for that.
I think the media throws that in there because that is the trope of serial
killers. I agree. So, he actually went to the doctor's office with his parents, and at the doctor's office, they had skeletons there in the office. And at first, he was really scared of them, but soon became very fascinated with them. And that is what eventually inspired him to go into the medical field. So before he joined the medical field, on July 4th of 1878, at the age of 18, he married his first wife, Clara A. Lovering, in Alton, New Hampshire, which I really hate that his first wife was named Clara. It really bothers me.
I do have something to add here that I know is factual because I looked it up. So he actually was bullied in school.
I could see that, yeah.
But he was bullied in school. If one of the things that I had said when I was describing him from his legend was that he would never meet anyone in the eye.
Right.
Well, yeah, he didn't because he was cross-eyed.
Oh, well, I mean, I wouldn't look at people either if I was cross-eyed.
So he was bullied in school because he was cross-eyed. So even growing, like, later on in life when people were making these statements that he would never meet anyone in the eye, well, he was fucking cross-eyed, so he couldn't meet anybody in the eye.
Are you making fun of people who
No,
are cross-eyed?
I'm not making fun of them.
Christina!
I'm not making fun of anyone for that. I'm just saying that, like, that was the problem. That was his problem. His
Yes.
left eye in
He had
particular.
an actual medical diagnosis.
Yeah. So, okay, bitch.
Okay.
And my facts say that he got married at the age of 17, but I mean, apples to apples here.
Yes. So in 1884, he actually gave up his position as a school teacher and decided to go to medical school. He went to medical school in Michigan, and while he was in medical school, he got this genius idea.
Yeah, this is where his life of crime begins.
Yes. So Mudgett gained possession of a body that bore a remarkable resemblance to another student who he just happened to be friends with. So they came up with this great idea that they would take out an insurance policy on his friend for $1,000. And they named Mudgett, or Holmes, as the beneficiary. They decided that his friend would disappear and they would use this cadaver to cash in on the insurance policy.
I always
and
wondered
then
how
they would split it.
How do you find someone as fucking fucked up as you so easily?
I mean, it's the 1800s. I'm sure they didn't see it as being fucked up. They probably just saw it as a great way to make money without actually hurting anybody.
Yeah, some people set a van on fire down the hill and claim that is on insurance.
Some people.
Shut up. It's not like I know anyone who ever actually did that.
We don't know anyone who would ever do that.
We're especially not related to them.
No. It is not us, by the way.
Yeah, no, it's not.
It's not us.
It's not us. Okay, anyways, without incriminating people that I love, go on.
Yes. So, this actually worked out for them, and they were able to split this money, and there was little to no investigation made into this. So they collected the insurance without trouble, and presumably they just divided it and went on their merry way.
So during his schooling, the reason why he had access to cadavers is because he actually worked in an anatomy lab under a chief anatomy instructor. And at some point, he also apprenticed under Dr. Nahum White, I think that's how you say his name.
I think that's right.
Who was an advocate of human dissection in New Hampshire. So he got exposed to that kind of stuff, and he was actually pretty good at it.
Yeah, he was. I mean, this was all based, he was very, very interested in medicine. I mean, that was like a legitimate interest of his. And he just kind of saw the opportunity there and took advantage of it.
Yeah,
So he figures out that conning insurance and committing insurance fraud works out for you pretty well, So that's good. So the rumor is that he was actually pretty rough with his first wife, Clara, and she left and moved back to their hometown. But he never actually legally divorced her.
Yeah, so the whole thing about the divorce is that supposedly he filed the paperwork and sent it to her, but she never received it.
She never did anything
so
with it.
The divorce was never finalized. They were actually never, ever divorced.
He finishes medical school. He's split from Clara. He's a single man. He can do what he wants. So he actually up and moves. So why not?
He's at Moyers Forks, New York now?
Yes. But he actually doesn't stay there very long.
No, rumor spread that Mudgett had actually been seen with a little boy who very shortly after disappeared. And he claimed that the boy went back home to Massachusetts, but no investigation took place, and Mudgett quickly left town just because the local speculation.
Yeah, he wasn't all about that life. So he then ends up moving to, Philadelphia.
Philly. He goes to Philly.
He goes to Philadelphia after that, where he procures employment as a drug clerk, which, cool, fine. That's what you do. And ends up, oh no, my notes are out of order.
But so he's working at the drugstore in Philly. But while he's working there, another boy died after taking medicine that was purchased from the store. While Holmes completely denied any involvement in the child's death, he still ended up leaving the city.
Yeah. So he ends up marrying a new woman named Myrta Belknap.
Belknap?
Belknap?
Yeah,
Belknap?
We'll go with Belknap.
What's Belknap? In Minneapolis, Minnesota, and they eventually have a daughter.
He's still married.
He's still married to Clara.
Still married to Clara. So he files for divorce a few weeks after marrying Myrta, alleging to infidelity on her part as he's marrying another woman. But okay, sure, whatever. And that's where we talked about, she never received the paperwork, so the divorce was never finalized. So now he's married to both women.
Right. So that is the year that he actually changed his name to Henry Howard Holmes, later to be known as H.H. Holmes.
And he has a lot of aliases.
A lot of aliases. And he probably did this to hide from the scams that he's been committing pretty much this entire time. He was pretty clever at obtaining cadavers, filing for insurance.
I mean, he was a fraudster. He was a con artist. His
MO would literally be to take out an insurance policy on someone, find a cadaver, and then claim that this person died. And he would collect the insurance money. Like, that was his MO. That's what he did. So while he's married to Myrta, they actually moved to Chicago.
Well, they moved to they're in Illinois, but they live in Wilmette. And he spends most of his time in Chicago.
Yeah.
So they're in Illinois.
Yes, they are. So when they're in Chicago, he takes over a drugstore that's owned by a Dr. Elizabeth Holton, but he eventually ends up buying the practice from this doctor. And I've heard rumors that people say that he murdered Dr. Holton and his wife. But later, Dr. Holton and his wife were discovered alive and well, just in another part of the country. So that's another one of those super fun rumors. So he does actually buy the property across the street from the pharmacy. That is truthful. That is accurate.
And he does actually buy the drugstore from them.
Yes, he does.
So those two things
are
accurate.
Facts. Those are facts. Those are actual.
But... so while it's not entirely confirmed, it is both reasonable that and very, very possible that he was actually performing
illegal abortions. Oh, yeah. It is 100% possible that he was performing illegal abortions. And in those days, it wasn't uncommon for women to pass away while having these procedures.
This was an easy way for anyone with medical experience to make money on the DL. Unethically, but...
Oh, yeah. Highly illegal, but still a good way to make money.
Still pretty common.
So he does buy the property across the street and does begin the construction of this quote-unquote murder castle. While he's building this castle, he uses different aliases to take out loans that allow him to hire companies and contractors to come and work on the building. But what he does is he doesn't murder them and hide their bodies because he doesn't actually give a shit about anyone knowing how this building works. He just doesn't want to pay for this shit. Yeah. So what he does is he takes out a loan, he hires the company, never pays the company, hires a different company under a different alias. They come in, work on the building. So if you want to get down to why the building is so jacked up, it's probably because he had multiple different companies working on the same building.
And they did have secret compartments, and it did have secret rooms and odd hallways and all of that stuff, but not to hide bodies. It was because he was a fraudster and a con artist. He was buying furnishings from using creditors' money.
Yeah, and we can get into that more as the story goes on.
But he was hiding furniture in those rooms. Yes,
he was. So the first floor was actually comprised of businesses, and the second floor was apartments that he rented out to tenants. And he actually borrowed $3,000 from a tenant to build a third floor, which was supposed to be the quote-unquote hotel, which the hotel, this whole building scheme and con started before the Chicago World Fair was even announced as being a thing.
Yeah.
So he didn't start this building as a way to kill people. He started this building as a way to hide all his scams and as a way to make money, because he would make money from the rent that the businesses paid. And the hotel rooms were often used by the business owners as places to nap, as places to store things, as it was all a part of his con. And what he would do is he would use this hotel, quote unquote hotel, as a reason for him to buy furnishing and then sell that furnishing without ever paying for said furnishing and then pocketing the money. And what he would do is he did have secret rooms, but all the businesses and tenants knew about the secret rooms. They all knew what was going on. They all knew where these rooms were. And in my research, I found that they actually had this game where the tenants and the business owners would go into those soundproof rooms and scream to see if you could hear them and to see how soundproof they actually were. And there were only 2 actual soundproof rooms. There were no gas chambers.
I heard one of them was a safe. It wasn't even a gas chamber.
Yes, it was a safe. And the media would say that the gas lines that were actually used for the lighting in these rooms were for the gas chambers. No, assholes. It was for gas lamps, lighting in the hotel.
Gotcha.
And the quote-unquote body chutes were actually just trash chutes, which were very common in Chicago buildings at this time.
Or one of the historian that did a bunch of research on the hotel was like, that was a dummy waiter. There was dummy waiters.
There were dummy waiters. I mean, it's all pretty common things found. They even went as so far to say there was a crematorium, which was impossible because it was literally just a wood stove. Like, you wouldn't have been able to fit a dead body in there even if you tried.
I heard that a portion of the misinformation came strictly from the fact that you had a bunch of outside reporters that were not based in Chicago.
Oh, absolutely.
Trying to do reports and news articles and stuff on them, and they were getting a lot of hearsay.
Well, what would happen is the police would say, oh, we found a table. And the news media would be like, oh, he must have been dissecting bodies on it. Yeah. And that's what they would report.
Sensationalizing. There was something really interesting that anyone that he would hire to work there, he would require all of his employees and even some of the tenants, fiancés and wives that all were working there to have life insurance policies and name him or one of his aliases as being the beneficiary.
And I think that's funny. I think he was just setting himself up for cons if he felt like he
from
was
the get-go.
Needing money or was running low on money for his businesses or anything like that.
Well, I mean, he could always set the place on fire whenever his tenants or workers were in there, and if one of them happened to die,
right?
It was a con. He was strictly just a con artist. But regardless, the castle functioned more like a shopping center than anything else.
Oh, yeah. And there was a guy, and I think his name was M.G. Chappell, actually came forward and testified that Holmes was selling him skeletons and that he claimed to know how Holmes got these skeletons. But however, he couldn't produce any evidence. And when they actually went to M.G. Chappell's house, he had a skull painted red in his, hanging in a tree in his front yard. But he couldn't give them any skeletons or any pieces of skeletons that Holmes had ever given to him.
No, he pointed them in the direction of where some stuff was supposedly buried and they never found anything.
Well, he told them that Holmes had acid tubs in the basement of the hotel, but when they went to look for them, all they found were buckets of oil that were used for the furnace.
Yeah.
So they couldn't ever actually find any evidence that Holmes had been doing this.
It was more than likely Homeboy was just trying to get 15 minutes of fame.
Yeah, I think he really was. So at this point, I think we've covered most of the rumors. So, I mean, he really didn't have anything. There were no acid baths. There were no crematoriums. There were no torture devices ever found. This castle was literally a con artist's dream.
Yeah.
He would use the secret passageways and the secret rooms to store things that he had stolen or conned from other people, and then he would wallpaper over the doors so it didn't look like anything was ever there.
Yeah.
It really was just a con artist's dream.
So Holmes began to have yet another affair with a woman named Julia, while still being married to both Murda and Clara. So Julia was the wife of Mr. Connor, who had moved into Holmes' building and worked for Holmes as a bookkeeper. When Julia's husband discovered the affair, he fucking left. He was like, bye.
But you know what's interesting? Is Holmes was considered a very dapper and good-looking guy, which in that time apparently, like, made you really have something going for you if you were a good-looking guy. So I think that's probably played into part of why he was able to do what he was doing, because in general, let's be honest, people who are good-looking psychologically tend to get away with
Well, that's why
more.
it is 100% real and true that the CIA tends to hire, or specifically does hire, very attractive people to be their agents, because we instinctually place more trust in people's attractiveness, I guess.
Yeah. Weird.
Bizarre.
Weird.
Anyways,
Back to
Julia. Baby daddy left Julia and her daughter Pearl behind.
So Holmes very quickly took out insurance policies on Julia and Pearl, with himself as the beneficiary, which is never a good sign. Julia disappears in 1891, and Holmes claimed that her and her daughter Pearl moved back to Michigan, but much later he claims that he killed Julia during a botched abortion. There's also some speculation that he poisoned Pearl, and bones were found buried in the basement
6-year-old girl
of the hotel, but I've found mixed reviews. Some experts say they were pearls and others say they were sheep bones.
Well, I mean, regardless, they disappeared and he was the beneficiary on the life insurance policy.
It's very likely that he killed them.
And to be honest, I do kind of believe that she did probably get accidentally pregnant and want to get rid of the baby.
And he may have poisoned Pearl to cover his tracks on it.
Yeah, so I do believe that. I do believe that.
The next and this should note, these are his like confirmed quote unquote victims.
Yeah.
So the next is Emmeline Seagrand in 1892. So he's moving very quickly. So he actually heard that she was this beautiful woman, and he heard that through Ben Petzl, which was his business partner / henchman. And he wrote to her offering her a job if she would move to Chicago and work for him. They would later claim that they were married, but there's no proof that they were ever legally married. Keep in mind, he's still legally married to Myrta and Clara all during this. No insurance policies can be found on her, but it's possible that he told her about his con jobs and got really close to her. It's said that he was very enamored with her and he really cared about her, and he may have told her too much. And she may have decided to come forward with what she knew and he killed her, or he got her pregnant and she died during a botched abortion.
I mean, either one of those things sound
highly plausible.
Yeah. The thing about this dude is he actually does have cronies. Like, he's not antisocial the way everybody describes him. He's known to be charming and sociable, and Petzl actually is a petty criminal and an alcoholic, but despite his issues, they're
good buddies.
They're good buddies, and it's speculated, at least, that he was a major player in a lot of his criminal schemes and plots.
I mean, he is. He was basically Holmes' right-hand man in most of the cons that they did.
So
that takes us to
Minnie Williams
in 1893. So it's just like a woman a year at this point for him. So Holmes offers her a job at the hotel as a stenographer or his secretary, whatever one you want to go with. And he actually ended up having a house with her in Chicago, and they also claimed to be married, and they were living together as a married couple. Well, she owned property in Fort Worth, Texas, and Holmes convinced her to transfer the deed of that property into one of his aliases, which was Alexander Bond. And funnily enough, Holmes was the notary that signed off on this transaction.
My God.
Not only does she transfer it to one of his aliases, he is the notary that signs off on it. So, that's fucked up. So he takes over possession of that land in Texas. Well, soon after that, Minnie's sister Nanny came to visit them, and the sisters claimed that they were going to take their brother on a trip to Europe. And they wrote a letter home to their family saying that this is what they were going to do. But both sisters ended up disappearing. And once they disappeared, Holmes claimed Minnie had gotten jealous of her sister Nanny because apparently Nanny was trying to get with Holmes. And so Minnie went into a fit of jealous rage and killed her sister. And so Holmes was helping Minnie get out of town to hide. But after that, a loan was taken out a few days later in Minnie's name, made payable to her brother, who was already dead.
Yeah, he'd been dead for 3 years at that point.
Yeah.
No, he killed them to get money. That's what he did. He wanted to be a cowboy and go to Texas and
get himself into some shit in Texas.
Yeah, I guess so. So, whatever.
Yeah. So, in 1894, Holmes leaves Chicago to go to Fort Worth for the property he got from Minnie Williams. He now gets married to Georgina York, who he met in Denver, Colorado. He's still married to Myrna and Clara, and now Georgina. So we're at a total of 3 wives who he is married to.
Yeah.
So he goes to Texas, and he bought some land. And it's rumored that he was going to build another murder castle. And eventually the building was took over by another business, and nothing kind of ever came of that. But what he was doing, which is a huge no in Texas in the 1800s, was he was borrowing horses from people and then selling them to other people for super cheap and pocketing the cash.
If you don't know anything about Texas laws and horses, it was a big fucking deal.
So people started catching on to this, and he was like, oh shit, I better get out of Texas because they will kill me for this. And he flees to St. Louis with his wife.
Missouri.
So at this point, he starts taking out credit for furniture and all kinds of big ticket purchases, then resells them without ever paying the credit off. This finally catches up to him in St. Louis, and he gets arrested for it. This is a no-no. He's not allowed to do this. He gets arrested. And while he's in jail, he meets Marion Hedgepath, who is a train robber.
This is what I'm saying. I think he legitimately did want to be a cowboy.
Oh, I really think he did too. Because Marion Hedgepath is a train robber, which is like a super cool thing to be in the 1890s, if you know what I mean.
Holmes had concocted a plan to kind of swindle the insurance company out of $10,000 by taking out a policy on himself and then faking his death.
Well, actually, the first scheme was they were going to do this with Ben Petzl.
Mm-hmm.
And he tells Marion Hedgepath about this plan while they're in prison. And Hedgepath is like, yeah, cool. Let me help you with that. I'll help you set it up. You just pay me some money. We'll be good to go. Mm-hmm. So dumbass Holmes is like, this sounds like an excellent business deal. I think we should do this. So Petzl's family is in on this scheme. Mm-hmm. Petzl is married. He has children. They all agree that Ben Petzl is going to fake his death, and they're going to split this $10,000 life insurance policy, and Petzl's family is going to up and move to London, and they're just going to be set forever, right? So this doesn't work out so well for Ben Petzl. They open a shop for inventors, and the whole point of this shop is for inventors to come in, and they'll help them get patents for their inventions. You know, they'll make some money on the side. Everything's great. Well, they stage a lab explosion, and the plan is to have a cadaver, because that's what Holmes does, that gets burned beyond recognition, and Holmes will claim this is Petzl because he will just conveniently be in the area.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the alias that they're going to use for this insurance policy is B.F. Perry, and that is one of Ben Petzl's aliases. Well, Holmes up and kills his homeboy, Petzl, leaves his body for this explosion.
Well, he figures instead of trying to find somebody that looks like him,
he's just gonna kill him.
Fucking kill him.
You know, his right-hand man. No big deal. So he kills Petzl, sets off the explosion, and because Petzl's family was in on the scheme, They didn't know that he had actually killed Petzl. They legitimately believe that this corpse is a cadaver. They don't realize that Petzl is dead. They think Petzl is already in London waiting for them to get there.
I don't understand his thinking here, because if the point was to kill him, to knock Petzl off so that way he couldn't testify against him and he knew too much and all that stuff, why the fuck tell his family? So what was the point? It's shooting yourself in the fucking foot to kill the actual man. I don't understand his thinking there.
I don't get it either, but...
I mean, he wasn't an unintelligent man. He was very intelligent. I
don't
feel like
know.
something's missing.
Maybe like they got into an argument. Maybe something happened between the two of them. But whatever it was, he kills Petzl. So Holmes never pays Petzl's family. He never pays them the money, but instead splits them up into two groups. It was Petzl's wife, the baby, and the other younger child, and then his 3 older children. So now Holmes, with Petzl's family and his own family with Georgina, he starts moving them about the country. And he says that Petzl's wife and her 2 children that are with her and the other 3 kids, he says that they're at like different ends of the country, all this kind of bullshit. Like, you know, he's got one set, but the other set are with, you know, other relatives or something, where it turns out they're mere blocks away from each other. Like, he's keeping it all together. But he's lying to them this whole time, saying that they're getting them to London. They're all going to be together again. You know, no big deal. Well, I don't know if the 3 older children, who are Howard, Nellie, and Alice, eventually start catching on to Holmes, or if they get into an argument with him, or what. But he eventually ends up killing Howard. And it said that he poisoned him, dismembered his body, and then burned him in the fireplace of a rental house they were in Michigan.
I wonder if he had insurance policies out on all of them.
I don't think he did.
Because that would make sense. Like,
I don't think he did. I think he legitimately was on the verge of getting caught and was just trying to cover his tracks. Because
then my thinking would be, okay, so if he convinced Petzl to take out insurance policies on all of them, that would make sense as to why he didn't, why he killed Petzl and then and the family knew about everything, because then he could set them all up and isolate them and then kill them off.
I don't know. There's no evidence that he ever took insurance policies out on the kids or
That's
going to
be my speculation. That's my speculation. I'm sticking to it.
Well, after he kills Howard, he moves the rest of the family up to Toronto. And this is where he ends up killing Alice and Nellie by locking the girls in the trunk of his car, attaching a hose and gassing them. He then buries their bodies in a shallow grave up in Toronto.
Which this probably does contribute to the whole gas chamber belief, because there was some correlation.
So now this is the super important part. The only murders that can actually be connected to Holmes are these 9 that we've just talked about. And the only bodies that were ever found were that of Ben Petzl, Howard, Nellie, and Alice Petzl. And the bones that were found in the basement could be pearls, but there's not enough scientific evidence at that point in time that it could be determined that, yes, those were Pearl's bones.
Well, good old Marion was angry that he did not receive any money from the faked death scam, and he told police about the fraud that Holmes had planned. So afterward, the authorities are like, fuck, and they're doubling their efforts to try and catch the now killer.
Right.
Known to be killer.
Right. So Hedgepath turns him in, but the insurance company was actually catching on to him as well.
Yeah.
They had paid out the policy, but were very suspicious of the circumstances surrounding Petzl's death.
Highly suspect.
Highly suspect. And so they began looking into the case themselves and met with Marion Hedgepath. Well, Hedgepath goes on and turns completely on Holmes. So Holmes is eventually tracked down and is arrested on charges of insurance fraud. And then a nice little charge from Texas turns up, where he is charged with stealing horses. So he gets to choose if he wants to face insurance fraud or horse thieving in Texas. Horse thieving at this time is punishable by death. In Texas, they will hang your ass for that. So he goes, you know what? I'm going to take the insurance fraud. He has no idea that they're investigating the murder of Ben Petzl and having that connected to him. Mm-hmm. So he thinks he's facing...
choosing the lesser of two evils.
Yeah, he thinks he's facing maybe 2 years in prison tops.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this doesn't work out for him. They do more investigation, and Holmes is eventually put on trial for the murder of Ben Petzl. And this is the only murder he has ever charged and convicted of. But what's even crazier is that he actually had 2 lawyers. And we don't have a ton of time to talk about his 2 lawyers, but it was a shit show. His one lawyer was actually really, really good and tried to get the court to postpone the trial because they didn't have enough time to go to Toronto and Michigan and St. Louis and all these places.
Because he moved everywhere, all over the place.
Fascinating. In the 1800s.
Yeah, seriously.
Not an easy thing to do.
It's been like most of your life would be spent on the road moving.
I know. There weren't major like highways and roadways and trains. And crazy how he managed to do this. But one lawyer was super crazy, like super over the top insane, and would claim all these wild things about, he even went as far as trying to get someone to come and sign an affidavit that they had seen Ben Petzl alive in another part of the country. Like, just insane.
Yeah.
And because the court refused to postpone his trial, he actually ended up representing himself for a couple days. And even though the only evidence they had against him was super circumstantial, the jury came back and immediately said he was guilty and suggested a death penalty.
Yeah, so bear in mind that Holmes initially claimed to be nothing more than an insurance fraud. Yeah. And he admitted to using the cadavers to defraud insurances and all that stuff, but not...
But once he's found guilty,
well, then it's like
he starts confessing to all kinds of crazy shit.
Because he needed another way to make... This is what I think. He needed another way to make money, and one of those ways to make money was if the lie is better than the truth, print the lie.
Right.
And so... That's such case, while he was incarcerated, Holmes was paid $7,500, which is worth over $200,000 today, adjusted for inflation, by the Hearst newspapers in exchange for his confession, much of which was found to be bullshit. But he knew how to make money.
Yep.
That was what he was good at.
Holmes claims that he killed up to 28 people, and it's hilarious because he claimed to killing this one woman. And she actually walked her ass into the post office and was like, just so you know, I'm still alive.
Okay, so that same woman, he had some business relations with her. I can't remember if she was his landlady or something. He had some business relations with her. And initially, Holmes tricked a lot of really intelligent people.
He did. He was a very, very good con artist.
So... Your initial impression of this woman when you read more about her is that she's kind of dim-witted.
Yeah.
And, she was easily tricked by him. Whatever, big deal. She goes to court and they start interrogating her about some of these insurance payouts that she may or may not have benefited from. And she refuses to respond and is kind of like quick-witted and sassy about it. So... I wonder if he just couldn't defraud her, and so that's why he said that he killed her.
I mean, it could be. I mean, he would confess to all kinds of shit. I mean, in a lot of the murders that he claimed he did, these people were still alive, just in other parts of the country. Yeah. And this became so sensationalized that basically any time a person would go missing or would die in mysterious circumstances in Chicago during this time period, people were just like, oh, Holmes killed them in his murder castle. And the media just ran with it. I mean, everything that they could come up with was sensationalized.
So he would give various contradictory accounts of his life, and on one day he would be possessed by Satan, and other times he was totally innocent. But I think this was, again, another conscious move that he was making to distort the reality, to confuse the police, and to, again, sell his story, make some money.
So it's interesting because eventually the local papers in Chicago did retract a lot of the original stories they had posted about him, but the national media never did. So nationally, he was known to be this horrific serial killer of over 200 people, but in Chicago, they eventually did report the actual facts of the case. But because it was never retracted nationally, he has this huge legend and mystique about him that, you know, is pretty widely known.
I mean, but it's such an American, it's such a worldwide thing. But like the quote that I said earlier, if the lie's better than the truth, print the lie.
Yeah,
it makes a better story. It sells better. It's just how we do our history, unfortunately.
Well, Holmes is eventually hanged on May 7th in 1896 at Philadelphia County Prison. And he actually was totally calm during this whole process, and right before he was hung said that he never killed anybody. So that's that.
I mean, so let me go into a little bit of the description of what the murder castle was described as in the fairy tale and the legend,
because it's pretty hilarious.
It's pretty ridiculous. So it's said that when Holmes was behind bars, the Chicago police started to investigate the murder castle. The ground floor of the building was divided into ordinary retail spaces, which that's true. There was a jewelry store, pharmacy, blacksmith shop, a barber, and a restaurant. That's
all true.
The third floor consisted of apartments, offices, and Holmes' living quarters, which is not true. It was the third floor was never officially finished.
Well,
right?
The third floor is what he constructed to be his hotel, but it was never actually used as a hotel.
Yeah, but I didn't think it ever actually got finished, though.
I think he finished part of it, and he would rent out pieces of it to tenants. But and this is what makes it even funnier, is during the World Fair, he was claimed to have been killing all these people in his murder castle. I keep saying Myrtle. Oh my God. His murder castle. But he actually set the third floor on fire in the middle of the World Fair for an insurance scam.
Yeah.
So he could not have possibly been killing people in the third floor after he destroyed it with a fire. It's just not possible.
So this is where they say that the second floor and the basement was where the House of Horrors truly began. And the second floor was occupied by tenants. Those were actually apartments.
Like legitimate people who paid rent.
There was
and
like a dozen
there.
People that lived there.
Yeah.
So,
and none of them ever mysteriously died.
No. So the second floor, totally normal. The basement, But anyways, so the legend, the urban legend, is the second floor was a maze of like 35 small windowless rooms with staircases and doors that led to nowhere, and false walls and trap doors and secret passageways and a staircase that opened over a really steep drop down into the basement where he would just throw bodies over. I mean,
really inventive shit.
Trap doors, dumbwaiters that enabled him to move the bodies around.
And you realize dumbwaiters were just like elevators.
And they were commonplace. Dumbwaiters were commonplace.
Yeah, he supposedly had gas chambers and soundproof rooms.
And peepholes.
Oh, my Lord. He was just a nefarious character.
That was just all bullshit.
None of it was real. The gas lines were actually just for lighting. He did have 2 soundproof rooms, which, I mean, I guess. And he did have rooms that were like oddly connected, but what he would do is he would just move the furniture that he was conning from people around these rooms and then wallpaper over the doorways. It was all to keep his cons going. Police would often be around this hotel investigating these cons. This guy was always being sued for not paying. And the cops would come. He would move the furniture to another room, wallpaper over the doorways, and the cops wouldn't be able to find it. It was all part of his cons.
Yep. So the castle itself was mysteriously gutted by a fire in August of the 1990s. According to newspapers, two men were supposedly seen entering. Gas cans were found. It burned. The site is currently occupied by the Inglewood branch of the Postal Service.
Yep. So
it's a totally mundane building now.
Very unexciting. But there's rumors that he was also Jack the Ripper. But those rumors aren't really founded.
Well, it doesn't matter because so that's what his great-great-grandson supposedly claimed. But in 2017, the government actually exhumed his body and tested it. And it was pristinely preserved because he actually wanted to be buried in a coffin of cement. I don't know.
Yeah,
why.
He was terrified of people robbing his grave, essentially.
Okay.
Which, as someone who used dead bodies for his cons, I find this very hypocritical.
Yeah. So they were able to positively identify his body as it being him.
Yeah. And I've read that it was pretty much impossible for him to have been in England and have been Jack the Ripper because during those years when Jack the Ripper was active, Holmes was actively being sued all the time and was in and out of court.
So Chelsea said earlier that he isn't technically a serial killer.
Well, he's not. If we talk about serial killers and the definition of serial killers are someone who kill other people with a distinct cooling off period between those crimes.
Mm-hmm.
Holmes was a con man who killed people for a con.
It basically equated to a gang member that kills
in all honesty, his first
people.
2 murders could have been botched abortions. So that doesn't count as a serial killer. That counts as he's a terrible doctor.
He's a killer.
The third one is Minnie Williams, and we don't really know what happened to her. All we know is that she vanished. Did she kill her sister? Maybe.
Who knows?
Did she just go somewhere else? Who knows? Did he kill her? Who knows? All we know is that she disappeared. And then the people that he killed after were all part of the Ben Petzl con and insurance fraud. So I don't count that as being part of serial killing either. So in my mind, he's not a serial killer. He had no motivation to kill these people aside from trying to get the insurance money.
Yeah, most serial killers don't kill for
fraud.
They kill for a deep
need, a psychological need.
Yeah, psychological need, not for money. If you had taken
here's my thing. If he had been taking out insurance policies on people and then killing those people to get the insurance money and staging it as an accident, I could kind of see that being a serial killer. Because serial killers, not often, but they will kill for financial gain. However, he was already using cadavers. Mm-hmm. He was just lying about who they were. So I don't think he actually took any pleasure in killing anyone. And most serial killers do find pleasure in killing others.
Yeah. I mean, I know that female serial killers tend to murder for personal gain. But again, I think that his was more situational. Something was going amiss and he needed
an out.
Yeah. So I don't know. Yeah, I'm kind of... He's a killer, but I don't think he's a serial killer.
If we were going to call anyone who killed multiple people a serial killer, we would have a lot more serial killers than we actually do.
Yeah. So, what do you rate him on the Dahmer scale?
I'm going to put him at a 3.
Yeah, 3. I think he's
a terrible human, we've said.
Nanny Doss was more malicious than he is.
Yeah, I think he was just a really good con man.
Yeah.
And a terrible doctor.
Human. Yeah, terrible human, terrible doctor. But yeah.
He's overall, he is still an interesting person, but the legends about him are definitely way more interesting than the truth.
And to be fair, like, even he was only what is speculated to be 9 confirmed kills. He was only charged with one actual.
Yeah, he was only ever convicted for the murder of Ben Petzl.
So, and back in the, I mean, you could never know. Some people could have just disappeared straight up from the embarrassment of being involved in it. Or fearful that they would be found out that they participated in the crimes.
I mean, and we're talking about the 1800s. People would just leave, and you wouldn't know where they went. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's no social media. There's no tracking of people at this point in time. They could have just left.
So there's a lot of unknowns there. I don't think he killed 9 people. Yeah. I mean, who knows? But I guess now it's time for our palate cleanser.
Yeah, let's have a little palate cleanser.
Palate cleanser. This is the palate cleanser.
I love that this is now your thing.
This is my theme song. Let us sing palate cleanser. All right, hit me with some memes.
Hey, Gary, I heard you cried during sex. Yeah, Mace will do that to you. That one's a terrible one.
I like that one.
Oh no.
Did you lose the memes already?
Well, it sent me back to the top.
I guess I gotta sing to fill the time. Singing. Come on, I'm running out of shit to say.
Sorry, I'm trying to find where
Try harder. You had one job, aside from all the research and being a hostess. And running your full-time job. And being a stay-at-home mom of 3 while running your full-time job. You just need to take better care of your responsibilities.
Says, when he's funny, has tattoos, and asks if I want to watch a documentary about serial killers. I am halfway to pregnant.
That's fantastic.
No, this one says, I love men, but I can't eat a whole one.
Oh. Is that a Jeffrey Dahmer one?
Sure is. And this one is Ted Bundy, and it says, I'm not like a regular serial killer. I'm a cool serial killer.
Oh my god. Fucking spare me.
Oh my god.
Lord haveth mercy.
That's a good one.
Yes.
Oh, this is a quote from Edmund Kemper.
Oh, here we go.
Here we go. I remember there was actually a sexual thrill. You hear that little pop and pull their heads off and hold their heads up by the hair, whipping their heads off, their bodies sitting there. That'd get me off.
I'm uncomfortable.
I cannot wait until we cover Edmund Kemper.
So I feel like Jeffrey Dahmer, Edmund Kemper, Ted Bundy, I feel like those should be 2-part episodes.
Yeah, and I want to save those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we're have a little bit more finesse.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
We're still kind of working out the kinks here. Although I feel like we're finding our groove.
Yeah, we are finding our groove. I mean, hey, I like us.
I like us too. I'm pretty sure it's only our friends that listen, but
it's fine. That's not true. We had 70 listeners on our last couple. Our average listener base is 70 of you. So hey,
that
guys.
is true.
Hey,
our episode this last Thursday has 43 plays already.
Oh, snap.
And it's Sunday, so I'm pretty proud of that.
Yeah, that's not bad at all.
We're doing awesome.
All right, y'all. Well, I think that's going to be the end of the episode. Remember, if you would love to help us out, it'd be fantastic if you could go and rate our podcast or share our podcast or leave a comment about our podcast on any of the platforms where you listen to us. Please, pretty please.
Please, please, please.
And also, give us a follow on Instagram.
Yeah, we post lots of funny serial killer memes, just regular memes. We are going to start trying to do lives on there, or at least one of us at a time will.
I mean, if you're interested, we can post more about our personal lives, but most of the time it's just us without makeup, drinking coffee and saying fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah,
all
so
right.
Give us a follow on Instagram at The Killer T.
We're also on Facebook at The Killer T.
And until next time, bye.
Bye.
Join us next week where we discuss the shoe fetish killer, Jerry Brudos.
fucking fall. I don't fucking know the words. You are tuning in to the Killer Buck My Butt.
We're tuning into Buck My Butt.
It's a sad day when you're just not fucking funny enough for the blooper reel. And you're like, all right, well, we're boring, so
We need to amp up the humor.
I had too much spit in my mouth. And I had to swallow.
God damn it, Christina. Get your shit together. Just do it.
My life. My fucking God. Hi, my name's Christina. I'm your host with my other host, Chelsea. You don't want to start off the episode that way? No. Oh, well, fuck you. Fuck this podcast.
You sound any more unenthusiastic to be here. I brought you your favorite coffee. We're talking about your